My parents demanded that I transfer my inheritance to fund my cousin's startup. When I refused, they brought me to a family gathering where everyone pretended not to know me. "She's just a stranger with no heart," my uncle said loudly. After 1 hour when they sent a priest to my house to talk sense into me. I never thought money would be what fractured my family beyond repair. When my grandfather passed, I inherited a home and a sizable financial portfolio, things I never expected. I was always close with him. We'd talk about books, gardening, and politics over lukewarm coffee in his sunroom. He didn't treat me like a child, even when I was one. He treated me like someone worth listening to. He didn't tell anyone else in the family what he had planned for his estate. Maybe because he knew. Maybe he'd already seen the selfishness in others, the subtle digs when someone else did well, the way my cousin Ronan talked about investing using other people's money while working part-time as a barista. After Grandpa died, I got a call from a lawyer. The inheritance was bigger than I could wrap my head around. The house I now live in was part of it, but there were also multiple stock portfolios, municipal bonds, and savings accounts. It was all structured neatly, with clear intentions. And those intentions included one directive: use this for your future. Not theirs. At first, the family responded with congratulations. Thin, performative ones, but I was trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. My mom even cried, but I couldn't tell if it was joy or envy. Then came the quiet suggestions. "You could help Ronan get on his feet," my mom said one night over dinner. "He's been trying so hard." "I'm proud of him for trying," I replied. "But I'm not an investor." That was the first tension. Then the phone calls started. Ronan, calling me cuz like we were buddies, even though we'd barely spoken in years. He pitched his latest idea like it was Shark Tank. Eco-scooters for rural towns. I asked why rural towns would need electric scooters instead of improving bus service. He didn't like that. "You're thinking too small," he told me. "You've got money now. You should think bigger." Bigger, to him, meant giving him $50,000 with no contract, no timeline, no return policy. I said no. That does not set everything in motion. Suddenly, I was being told by my mother that I was letting the family down. My father wouldn't even speak to me directly, just nodded along to whatever my mother said. My Aunt Coralie sent me a typed letter. A physical letter, like it was 1950. "Your cousin needs someone to believe in him. Your grandfather always saw you as the one who would hold this family together. Don't let that legacy become selfishness." I read it once. Then again. And felt something close to nausea crawl into my chest. Still, I stood firm. I refused to be emotionally manipulated. But I underestimated how far they were willing to go. The gathering at my parents' house wasn't supposed to be about me. That's what they told me. "Just a simple family cookout," my mother said on the phone. "Burgers and corn and catching up." I bought potato salad, store-bought, because I didn't feel like cooking. I wore a navy cardigan and jeans, and even curled my hair a little, something I rarely did anymore. I wanted to feel like I belonged. Like maybe I was overreacting and things were normal again. The second I stepped into the backyard, I knew I'd made a mistake. Laughter dropped off. Conversation stopped. Faces turned but didn't smile. I stood there, holding the Tupperware, feeling every inch of my skin go hot and cold all at once. I walked toward Dana, another cousin who I used to be close with when we were younger. She looked straight past me, pretending not to see me at all. I tried again. "Hi, Dana." No answer. She moved right by me like I was furniture. I blinked, confused. Walked toward Uncle Alfred, my father's brother. He was standing by the grill, tongue in hand. "Hey. Did I do something wrong?" I asked. He looked me square in the eye and raised his voice loud enough that I knew it was meant for everyone else to hear. "She's just a stranger with no heart." Laughter scattered like gravel. Not everyone laughed, but no one objected. And that silence hurt more than the words. I froze. Completely stunned. My heart started thudding in my ears. I couldn't think of what to say. I glanced around, searching for my mother, for anyone with a kind expression. But their faces had turned away, like I didn't exist. I placed the salad on a nearby table and turned to leave, my breath catching somewhere between panic and grief. I drove home in silence, barely seeing the road through my tears. I wasn't even fully through the front door when I heard another knock gently, rehearsed. I opened it to see Father Tom from our childhood parish. White collar, kind eyes, soft voice. "Marielle," he said. "I've come to talk with you. Your family asked me to." I stared at him. Speechless. He stepped inside before I could say anything and walked toward the living room like he'd been here before. "Your mother is worried," he said. "She thinks the money has changed you. She believes that it made me selfish," I finished for him. "That's what they said, right?" He didn't confirm, but he didn't deny it either. "I've seen good people lose their way," he continued. "Greed is a shadow that follows the lonely." That phrase. That line. It hit me in the gut. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just opened the door and said, "I think it's time you leave." He paused. Then nodded and stepped back out, murmuring a God bless as he left. I locked the door. Turned off my phone. And sat down in the middle of the floor, cradling Dottie, my old mutt who sensed something was wrong and laid her head on my knee. I felt something break inside me that night. But it wasn't defeated. It wasn't guilt. It was clear. The next morning, I didn't check my messages. Not because I didn't care what they had to say, but because I already knew. I knew there would be voicemails from my mother, maybe another email from Aunt Coralie. I imagined some overly polite, concerned message from Ronan because passive aggression was his love language. Instead, I made myself coffee, sat on the back steps with Dottie curled at my feet, and stared at the garden Grandpa had once tended. He planted foxgloves and lavender, even though they didn't belong in Wisconsin soil. "You can't tell plants where they can't grow," he once told me. "They'll surprise you if you give them time." That stuck with me more than I realized. Around noon, I finally turned my phone back on. 34 missed messages. 17 voicemails. 7 new emails. Every notification was a knot in my stomach. I started listening to the voicemails, just to get it over with. One by one. "You're hurting everyone, Marielle. This isn't what Grandpa would have wanted. Money's poisoned you. I didn't raise you to be this cold." And then the one that made me sit straight up. "Ronan's borrowed money from me, thinking you'd back him up. Now I'm out $5,000. You need to make this right." That was from Aunt Coralie. I let the rest play out on speaker as I cleaned the kitchen. Each message stripped away a piece of the illusion I had held on to that we were just having a disagreement, a misunderstanding. But no. This wasn't confusion. This was coordinated. It was pressure. Manipulation dressed up as family concern. And somewhere in all of it, I started to feel calm. Not angry. Not even hurt anymore. Just clear. I called my lawyer the next day and told her I wanted to make some updates. Specifically, I wanted everything moved into a secondary trust with layered privacy clauses. She walked me through it, and within a few days, everything was protected under a corporate veil. No one could trace the money back to me unless I gave them permission. I also had a long conversation with my financial planner about how to quietly remove my parents as my emergency contacts and designate a close friend instead. We updated everything. I did not share this with anyone. I let the silence speak for me. That's when the messages shifted from scolding to begging. My mother showed up unannounced 3 days later. I could see her car from my window, still the same forest green Subaru she'd had since I was in college. I didn't open the door right away. I watched her from the window as she stood on the porch, holding a Tupperware container and a heavy look on her face. When I finally opened the door, she smiled like nothing had happened. "Thought I'd bring you some of my chicken pot pie." I didn't say anything. I just stood there. Her smile faded quickly. I want us to talk. I opened the door wide enough for her to step in, but I didn't move out of the way. She brushed past, walked into the living room, and sat on the couch like she still had a right to that space. Marielle, I know this has been hard, she began. For who? I asked. She sighed. For all of us. I stayed standing. You know Ronan didn't mean for this to blow up, she continued. He just really believed in this project. He believed I'd pay for it, I said. There's a difference. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she picked at the cuff of her cardigan and said, almost too softly, he's family. So am I said. There it was again, that flicker. The one that showed up every time I reminded her that I was more than just the responsible one. That I had limits. After a long pause, she looked up at me and said, could you just loan us a little something? Just enough to help us replace the roof. We're not getting any younger, and the insurance won't cover it all. The audacity of that moment was almost poetic. After orchestrating a public humiliation, freezing me out, sending a priest to guilt-trip me, and now they wanted roof money? I stared at her for a long moment before answering. I'm renovating my house too, I said. It's expensive. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. She nodded slowly, like she understood, but didn't agree. Like she was still looking for some sliver of the daughter she could shame back into compliance. But I wasn't there anymore. When she finally left, the silence in my house felt different. It wasn't empty. It was mine. Over the next few weeks, the calls stopped. No more emails. No more drive-bys. I think word got out that I wasn't playing along. Maybe Ronan finally realized I wasn't going to cave. Maybe they thought I'd come to my senses eventually. But I had. Just not in the way they hoped. The next shift came from outside the family. A friend of mine, Sasha, invited me over for dinner one Friday night. She was one of the few people I had confided in during all this, someone I'd known since graduate school, someone who didn't sugarcoat things but never judged either. I hadn't really seen anyone socially in weeks. My world had shrunk to my house, Dottie, and my own head. I made lasagna, she said when I arrived, pulling me into a hug. You look tired. I am, I said. But I'm here. She poured me wine and we sat out on her deck under string lights, eating off mismatched plates, the way real friends do. Eventually, she leaned back in her chair and said, I've been thinking about what you told me. About the gathering. About the priest. I laughed, bitterly. The priest, I said. That was their final act. She tilted her head. Have you ever thought about writing this down? I mean, not just journaling it. Telling your story somewhere might help other people? I hadn't. The truth is, I was still carrying a lot of shame. Not for saying no, but for the fact that it even got that far. For how quickly I'd been cast out by people I once thought loved me. She nudged her wine glass toward mine. Seriously. People need to hear about this kind of stuff. Families use guilt like it's a currency. You said no, and they acted like you burned the house down. I nodded, but didn't commit. Not yet. That night, lying in bed with Dottie curled up against my legs, I started drafting a post in my phone's notes app. I didn't know where it would go, maybe Reddit, maybe Medium. I just needed to get it out. I wrote about inheritance. About Ronan. About the barbecue where they all pretended I didn't exist. I wrote about the priest, and the knock on the door, and the Tupperware full of pot pie. I didn't name names. But I told the truth. When I finished, I didn't post it. Not yet. But it was there. Ready. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. I got a letter in the mail, not an email, a letter. This time from Uncle Alfred. It was 4 pages long. Handwritten. He recounted everything Ronan had told him, that I had promised to support the business, that I'd flaked out and left him stranded. He called me entitled, accused me of spitting on the family legacy, and ended with a line I'll never forget: "One day, when you're old and alone, I hope the money keeps you warm." That was it. That was the moment something in me finally clicked over. I read the letter twice, folded it neatly, and slid it into the drawer with the rest of the correspondence I'd been collecting. And then I opened my laptop, logged into Reddit, and posted the story. Every word of it. I didn't hold back. I chose the r/relationships subreddit because it wasn't just about venting. I wanted insight, support, maybe even a push in the right direction. I clicked post and walked away from the computer. By the time I checked back a few hours later, it had exploded. Hundreds of comments. Thousands of upvotes. People sharing their own stories are eerily similar. Grown children who had been manipulated, financially drained, emotionally blackmailed by their families. People thanking me for saying things they'd never been able to say out loud. I felt seen. And maybe that's why, when Ronan emailed me the next day, I didn't feel the usual twist in my gut. It was a pathetic message, written in a rushed tone that tried to sound casual. "Hey, just heard through the grapevine that you've been talking about me online. Not cool. You're making the family look bad. If you don't take it down, I'll have to respond." There it was. The audacity. The entitlement. The threat disguised as concern. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to my attorney, who'd already helped me put together a folder of everything, every voicemail, every letter, every attempt at financial coercion. Just in case. Not because I was afraid of being sued. I wasn't. But because I was done playing defense. That weekend, the post made it to the Reddit front page. More than 40,000 upvotes. My inbox is filled with messages from strangers. Some share their heartbreak. Some are asking for advice. Some just say, "Thank you." One woman wrote, "I've been afraid to cut off my mother for years because of guilt. You gave me courage." Another wrote, "You're not alone. We see you." And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was the villain in my own family's story. I felt like a survivor. And I wasn't finished yet. Because revenge, at least the kind I believe in, isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming. Rebuilding. Making yourself so whole that their absence feels like fresh air instead of a hole. And the next move I was planning? That was going to be the most satisfying one yet. The funny thing about truth is that once you put it out there, really put it out there, there's no way to shove it back in. And I had no interest in trying. I wasn't hiding anymore. I didn't owe anyone silence. And if my story made the people who hurt me uncomfortable, maybe it was time they sat in that discomfort for a while. I didn't post anything else. No updates. No follow-ups. I let the original post live on its own, with its thousands of comments and hundreds of messages. Every now and then I'd scroll through them, especially late at night when the silence in my house crept a little too close. But mostly, I moved forward. I started volunteering again, something I hadn't done since before Grandpa got sick. I joined a local women's group that hosted book drives and financial literacy workshops. I helped a single mom set up a bank account in her name after leaving an abusive marriage. I brought Dottie to a few of the meetings and everyone fell in love with her. Life, slowly and without fanfare, began to feel like mine again. And then the letter came. Not an email. Another handwritten letter, this time from my parents. It wasn't an apology. It was what they probably thought was a peace offering. They had heard rumors that I had been airing family matters publicly, and they were disappointed. But they hoped I'd consider coming to Easter brunch, for old time's sake. They missed me, they said. The letter even included a note about my inheritance. "We know it was Lawrence's decision, but maybe we can revisit the idea of using a portion of it for the family." I laughed out loud. They couldn't even pretend to miss me without slipping in a money grab. But it gave me an idea. Not petty. Not cruel. Just poetic. You see, I had been working quietly with a nonprofit financial education center in Madison, the same one that helped women rebuild their lives after messy divorces or estrangement. They did good work. Important work. But like most nonprofits, they struggled for funding. And I had money. A lot of it. So I made a call. A few weeks later, I met with the director, a woman named Trina with warm eyes and a voice like sandpaper and honey. I asked what they needed most. She handed me a typed list of computers, updated classrooms, marketing outreach, transportation stipends for women who didn't have cars. We walked through their small building, a converted two-bedroom home with creaky floors and too many mismatched desks. When we reached the back room, she showed me a rusted file cabinet overflowing with handwritten intake forms. "We want to digitize everything," she said. "But we just don't have the staff." I nodded. By the end of that week, I had transferred $75,000 to them anonymously. Enough to upgrade their systems, cover transportation for a year, and offer 3 full scholarships to a new program they were launching: financial defense and autonomy for adult women navigating toxic families. It wasn't just charity. It was a legacy. The kind of legacy my grandfather would have been proud of. And I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not yet. But word travels in small towns. Especially when your name shows up on the donor plaque outside a newly renovated community center. It only took a month before my father showed up on my front porch. I hadn't seen him since before the barbecue. He looked smaller. Not older, exactly, but diminished. Like a balloon that had been slowly losing air. He didn't knock right away. Just stood there, shifting from one foot to the other, looking down at his hands like they held the answer to something. I opened the door. He blinked. "I thought you might slam it in my face." I leaned against the frame. "I thought about it." We stood there in the silence for a moment. He cleared his throat. "I saw what you did." I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "That's good," I said. He hesitated. "Why them?" That stopped me cold. "Why them?" I repeated. "You mean, why not you?" He said nothing. So I answered him. "Because they asked for help. They didn't try to manipulate me. They didn't guilt me. They didn't send a priest to my house or tell an entire backyard full of people to treat me like I was invisible." He looked away. His shoulders curled inward. They needed a leg up. Not a handout. They wanted to do something meaningful. And they're not related to me, so their kindness wasn't conditional. He looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something that looked like understanding. Or maybe just the first crack in whatever wall he'd been standing behind all these years. "I didn't know how badly we hurt you," he said, barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. Some truths don't need your forgiveness. Some apologies don't come wrapped in the kind of healing you hoped for. And some peace doesn't look like reconciliation, it looks like standing in your own doorway, choosing not to step aside. He left without asking for anything. And I didn't offer. A few weeks later, I got another letter. This time from Ronan. Typed. Formal. Addressed to Ms. Marielle Renaud. He was, apparently, being sued by one of his investors. Someone from the family who had given him money under the assumption that I'd back the venture if it failed. He wanted a statement from me confirming that I'd never agreed to anything. That part, I was happy to do. I had my attorney draft a statement, notarized, affirming that I had never at any point pledged support, financial or otherwise, to Ronan's business. We sent it over with a very polite letter declining to communicate further. No threats. No rudeness. Just facts. That was the day I officially stopped being their scapegoat. The legal statement I sent Ronan may have been just a formality on paper, but in reality, it was a final, clean cut. A full stop. There was no ambiguity left to cling to. And when my attorney informed me a few weeks later that Ronan had defaulted on his personal loan with Aunt Coralie and that a small claims suit had been filed, well, let's just say I didn't feel much. I wasn't gleeful. I didn't dance on metaphorical graves. I just sat in my sunroom, the same one Grandpa used to read in, and thought, this is what happens when people confuse love with entitlement. Spring came early that year. The lilacs outside the window bloomed 2 weeks ahead of schedule, a burst of color after a long, bleak winter. I started a new hobby, making herbal teas from the plants in my garden. It gave me something to do with my hands and a reason to stay connected to the earth. To be rooted in something real. Meanwhile, the non-profit I had supported was thriving. They invited me to an open house to see the finished renovations. Trina gave a speech about their mission and what it meant to have a space that made women feel safe again. She never mentioned my name, but when she looked at me from the podium, I saw the gratitude in her eyes. And I nodded. I was no longer part of a family that defined me by what I could provide. I was part of something that grew out of choice. Out of care. Out of alignment. It wasn't long after that when my mother tried again. She sent a card this time. Not a letter. Not a voicemail. Just a simple card with tulips on the front and her handwriting inside. Neat and deliberate, as always. We miss you. Your father isn't well these days. I wish things were different. Love, Mom. No demands. No veiled guilt trips. No requests for money. And still, I didn't answer. Because sometimes silence is the only boundary people can't argue with. My therapist, yes, I started therapy again after everything, helped me understand that reconciliation is not always the goal. That peace and proximity are not the same. That you can love someone and still not let them back into your life. That forgiveness, real forgiveness, often comes without the other person's involvement. So I forgave them in my own way. I forgave them by not becoming bitter. I forgave them by not letting what they did define me. I forgave them by choosing to live better, not out of spite, but out of clarity. One afternoon, I ran into Dana, my cousin who had once pretended I didn't exist, at the infamous barbecue. We were both at the local farmer's market. I was buying honey. She was standing by a booth selling scented candles, looking down at her phone. When she looked up and saw me, she stiffened. I could see the hesitation in her face. Was I going to confront her? Call her out? Ignore her? I didn't do any of those things. I just nodded politely, offered a slight smile, and kept walking. That was it. That was all I needed. That small moment of I'm good. You don't get to live rent-free in my head anymore. And that, really, was the best revenge. Not gloating. Not public shaming. Not proving anything to them. Just living. Truly living. A few months later, I started teaching part-time at the community college Introduction to Financial Literacy. Mostly women in their 30s to 50s. Some recently divorced, some starting over. I created a short module called Boundaries and Bank Accounts that focused on how emotional manipulation often bleeds into financial decisions and how to recognize the red flags. I used vague anecdotes from my own life. No names. Just truths. And one day, a woman stayed after class. She had tears in her eyes and clutched her notebook like it was armor. I thought I was alone, she said. But everything you said. I've been through it too. I didn't hug her. I didn't offer advice. I just said, you're not alone. You're never alone in this. And I meant it. Because by then, I had stopped needing my old family to feel whole. I had a new community. A new identity. A new peace. One built not on shared blood, but on shared values. On choosing myself without shame. On protecting what was mine without guilt. On understanding that real love doesn't demand a sacrifice, it offers a hand, not a leash. So yes, my parents cut me off when I refused to fund my cousin's fantasy business. Yes, they orchestrated a performative rejection to punish me. Yes, they sent a priest to talk sense into me. But none of that broke me. In the end, I chose my future over their comfort. And I never looked back.